So life evolved about 3.5 billion years ago, and DNA has been our constant companion ever since then, the foundation of all adaptive complexity and biodiversity that we see in the world. And DNA is an absolutely wonderful molecule, but it's fallible. DNA copies itself with extraordinary fidelity, but sometimes mistakes happen that are called mutations. And a major challenge in life is to deal with the fact that this DNA copying machinery, and I highly recommend looking at the YouTube website. There's a wonderful computer animation of DNA actually copying itself, where you can see, wow, it's really good, but you can easily see the potential for copying errors. Life had to cope with cloning, with asexual reproduction for the first couple of billion years. Eventually, single-celled organisms like bacteria evolved the capacity for sexual reproduction, for sex. They started to exchange genes through these little things called papillas. It's not very well organized. They're basically just kind of vomiting genes at each other more or less randomly. Oh, you have some genes. Oh, you have some genes. Okay. But that's actually a very good way to spread good mutations. It can help these little creatures adapt to the environment. And it's also a very effective way to sort of get rid of bad mutations, so that if you've got a wonky gene that doesn't work very well, you might get a better copy of it from somebody else, and then your offspring don't inherit all your wonky genes. So sex is basically a very effective way to help protect your offspring against harmful mutations and to minimize the harmful mutation load in your offspring. But still, the mate choice that's happening with the bacteria kind of going, have some genes, is pretty random. They don't do a whole lot of sophisticated mate choice. Right? They're not choosing whose genes do I want to combine mine with to create offspring. Well, eventually you do get multicellular life, and then something extraordinary happens shortly thereafter. You don't just get multicellular bodies, you get animals evolving eyes, vision. The lights go on in the world so that you can finally see, oh, predator, run away, prey, go after it. But crucially, you can see, potential mate, and, oh, lo and behold, they look symmetrical, healthy, they work, they have a high energy throughput. As soon as you get eyes evolving, right around 543 million years ago, you get the potential to do mate choice at a distance. Right, to say, oh, yeah, you're my species, but you're not the best one I've seen so far. I'm going to wait, yeah, you. As soon as you get the potential for vision-based mate choice, you get what's called the Cambrian Explosions, an extraordinary increase in biodiversity that produces organisms like all of these, many of which look absolutely bizarre and alien to us, and only a few of which became ancestors of any existing life on Earth. But you quickly get ornamentation and coloration and conspicuous signs of bilateral or radial symmetry, and all these other visual indicators of health and genetic quality. And that, I think, is one of the major things driving biodiversity and organic complexity, is that capacity for mate choice at a distance. So ever since the Cambrian explosion, 500 million years ago, evolution has operated by two principles, not just one. Yes, natural selection for efficient survival. Avoid predators, find prey, deal with competition over resources. But also social and sexual selection for conspicuous signals of health and good genes and low mutation load. And these conspicuous signals of genetic quality can take lots of different forms, right? They can be morphological signals, like colorful palps on a mantis shrimp, bright coloration on a mandrill's face, red ochre, which humans have used for at least 120,000 years as facial and hair ornamentation. You also get the body being shaped, tails of the guppy and the peacock and the upper body muscles of males. These are all sexually selected ornaments as well. And then, the rightmost column, you get behavioral signals. The loud mating call of the Tungara frog, the bowerbird building his amazing bower, as Gad mentioned in the last talk, and cave paintings, which I think are probably just the Pleistocene form of teenage graffiti, right? Look what I can do. Here's some artistic virtuosity and creativity. That's a behavioral signal. And if you look across different species, you can think of each species not just as a different survival machine, but a different set of sexually selected ornaments, a different set of traits that are there to be attractive in mating and to serve other social functions. So these are 5 different primate faces. Primates have good color vision, and because of that, they're particularly attracted to bright coloration on faces. And each different species of primate out of the 300-odd species has a quite distinctive facial appearance that does seem to play an important role in mate choice, that also seems to happen for humans. The revival of the hipster beard phenomenon is sort of a reclaiming, right, of the ancestral importance of primate facial hair. And it really is mostly about genetic quality and creativity and health and testosterone load. Only rarely do beards offer actual material resources like Pabst Blue Ribbon in the beard, right? So it's not delivering beer to the women, it's delivering a promise of good genes. And also within humans, different little ethnic groups. These are computer averages of different female faces. In each country, hundreds of females were photographed, and their facial structures were computer averaged. And you can see there's some slight differences, where if they continued evolving for another million years in isolation, you know, the Dutch would end up looking really quite different, perhaps, than the Irish. And this is also testimony that over the last several hundred generations, the males have been exerting mate choice in each of these countries, but in slightly different directions that lead also to aesthetic biodiversity within the human species. And you can do the same thing for any other set of ethnic groups around the world. So to understand, how do we demonstrate quality? How do we show off fitness? How do we do fitness signaling? It's important to think about what keeps the signals reliable, right? What keeps them hard to fake? Why is it that not just any guy could do that, right? Or maybe they could. How would you tell? Well, there's some key principles for keeping signals reliable that happen across the whole of the biological world. One is conspicuous waste. If you can just burn a lot of energy or time or resources that your lower fitness rivals could not afford, then that is a hard to fake indicator, and that's a reliable fitness signal. So raw body size, height, lean body mass, using lots of costly materials, spending a lot of energy, doing a lot of energy throughput, having a high metabolic rate or anything that demands it, or investing a lot of time in learning behavioral skills that are risky and dangerous. Those are all hard to fake indicators. And a lot of what we do in human life has to do with displaying signals to each other that involve some conspicuous waste, or as Gad pointed out, what we now call conspicuous consumption. But that's not the only principle. It's not all about just size. There's also conspicuous precision. How precisely can you grow your body? How precisely can you produce a behavioral ornament? Can you grow a face that's typical, that's structurally average for your ethnic group? That's impressive. Can you grow a face that's bilaterally symmetric? That's hard to do. Mutations and growth errors disrupt symmetry. But also in the domains of behavior, can you precisely repeat complex patterns? Like play an instrument with a high level of virtuosity. That's hard to do. And this principle of conspicuous precision is also analogous to the consumerist principle of fit and finish in product quality. Right? So you assess the Lexus not just in terms of size, but how finely is it made. And animals have been assessing each other with respect to conspicuous precision for 500 million years. A third principle is conspicuous creativity or novelty. Is this something I haven't seen before, and yet it still kind of makes sense? Right? Novelty is hard to produce. Genuinely innovative novelty that's both new and useful is particularly hard to produce. Anybody who can do it is impressive. And we particularly value novelty in the domain of mate choice with regard to fads and fashions, hairstyles, clothing styles. And in the domain of verbal courtship, novelty takes the form principally of storytelling and joke telling. Right? So humor is a very important part of human mate choice, and it's a display of kind of cognitive novelty. Finally, in a highly social species like ours, where we gossip and we trade information about reputation and prestige and status, conspicuous reputation counts for a lot. Have I heard of you? Then I'll probably be attracted to you, right? Brian Lochte, yeah, he's cute, but also the gold medals help a lot, right? Anne Hathaway, cute, but the fact that she's hosted the Academy Awards and can sing and dance and people respect her and serious actress is pretty, that helps a lot. So these four principles, I think, account for a lot of the structure of the behavioral displays that we send to each other, and a lot of the structure of the human body that we find attractive. So the human body itself is a kind of record of what our ancestors found sexually attractive in each sex. And at the morphological level, there are records of our ancestors' sexual preferences shaping the human face to make it different from the faces of other hominids and other primates. Male versus female height shows a record of female selection for male height, male upper body muscles. There's now a lot of evidence those are attractive to women, not quite the degree of muscularity shown here, but a reasonable hunter-gatherer kind of upper body mass. Fat deposits that are in particular places, breasts, buttocks, and thighs on women. Those are the high fertility forms of fat. And then general physical health, right? That's attractive. And we have specialized behavioral systems for displaying all of these morphological traits and health traits and physical fitness, right? It's hard for women to chase after men when they're actually hunting. But men are willing to do aerobic stuff in place called dancing, right? So you can assess how long do they last, how much energy output can they do. All hunter-gatherer tribes do aerobically intensive dancing, and it's important to me. Competitive sports, obviously important physical fitness indicators. And as I'll argue later in the talk, foreplay and copulation itself is an aerobic fitness indicator. But the human brain, this 3-pound ornament that we have, is particularly wonderful as a way of demonstrating genetic quality because it's particularly complex and vulnerable to harmful genetic mutations. The reason is it's the most complex organ in the body. Most of the human genome is expressed in the human brain. And therefore, most harmful mutations that disrupt any genes or gene regulatory systems on any chromosome will disrupt brain function to some degree. This is why inbreeding makes your kids dumber. So the brain is a particularly sensitive fitness indicator. And from the Mating Mind book onwards, the last 15 years, I've argued that a lot of human mental traits evolved principally as signals of our genetic quality and intelligence to attract mates and friends and to give us social status. Some of these are particularly hard to explain in survival terms, right? Are mostly ornamental. Why do we produce music, art, humor, or conspicuous displays even of good mood, right? These aren't going to keep the saber-tooths from eating us. They won't drive away infectious pathogens. But they are always rated as romantically attractive in every culture studied so far. So mental fitness indicators are also crucial in humans and in both sexes. There's a common misconception that evolutionary psychologists take Darwin's original sexual selection theory, which was basically females choose and males compete, and it's a one-way system where females select male traits and not vice versa. A misconception that that's how we think about human mating. No, I've argued for 20 years that in humans, like in socially monogamous birds, where they do mutual courtship dances, humans have had a system of mutual mate choice and long-term pair bonding for at least 1 million years, possibly as long as 3 million years. So when humans are courting, we mutually display fitness indicators, both physical and mental. We do assortative mating, where smart people tend to end up with smart people and beautiful people with beautiful people. And that actually tends to yield sexual equality in many indicators and signaling motives. If you have mutual mate choice, then there are about equal incentives, usually, for females to compete for males and vice versa, particularly for long-term mating. So it's not like it's only the females are selecting the male bodies and the male brains, but vice versa as well. Males have shaped female human evolution just as much as females have shaped male human evolution. Okay, Gad mentioned women's ovulatory cycles, and there's, in the last 10 years, been a real renaissance of interest in the concept of humans having estrus. Now, obviously, human females don't get big red genital swellings for 3 days a month like bonobos and chimpanzees. But the fundamental evolutionary logic here is important, and it does apply to humans. From the first day of menstruation to the 28-day end of the cycle, this is the plot of actual fertility. Your probability of getting pregnant given one copulation is a function of where you are in the cycle. So when you're menstruating, your probability of getting pregnant is very low, about 1%. It increases around day 8 into your cycle. You've got about a 25% chance of getting pregnant. It peaks a little bit above 40% around day 12 or 13, just before ovulation. When ovulation happens, the probability of getting pregnant drops precipitously. Now, the reason why this matters is that if a woman's in a long-term relationship and she's continually having sex with a guy, her willingness to do that should not fluctuate much across the cycle. Right? If she's continually having sex, she'll get pregnant sooner or later. However, if a woman has a one-night stand, short-term mating, it matters a lot whether she does that in this fertile phase or in this phase. And indeed, there's a lot of evidence now that women's preferences and behavior change quite substantially across the cycle, particularly for short-term mating. This is not very relevant if you're happily married to a high-quality guy. But if you're not, it does matter. So women at higher fertility phases seek to poach better genes from the highest fitness local guys they can find. This is where the psychology of the so-called alpha male comes into play. Those women in the peak fertility phase do more mate search, more socializing, going out more to parties. They eat less, they stay at home less. There are a few papers now showing that they avoid rape and incest more effectively. For example, they don't answer phone calls from stepdads or dads as much during the fertility phase, but they do answer phone calls from their moms, because their moms won't rape them and impregnate them. If her long-term partner is lower fitness than she would like or than she could get in a short-term partner, women will express less satisfaction with that guy in the peak fertility phase. So if female sexual interest was all about lifelong monogamous pair bonding, you would not see these cycle shifts. Rather, female sexual psychology seems adapted to, well, he's fine, he provides some meat and maternal care, but if I can trade up to better genes with a short-term mating with local Mr. Alpha, or Mr. Creative, or Mr. Louis C.K., whatever, then women will do that. At peak fertility, women have more fantasies about short-term affairs with higher fitness men. Suddenly, whatever Bill Clinton or Ryan Gosling becomes more attractive. They flirt more with those men. If an attractive Frenchman asks them to dance, they're more likely to say yes. That was a study that was published. And they have more actual short-term affairs with higher fitness men. Their lower fitness partners are not entirely oblivious to this. And their husbands will unconsciously mate guard them more, for example, text them more messages during peak fertility. And the pill and all hormonal contraception eliminates all of these effects. So look for massive class action lawsuits against Big Pharma once women. It's also the case that women at higher fertility phases show stronger preferences for lots of male traits that are reckoned to be good genes indicators. Physical fitness indicators, like women more strongly prefer taller men at peak fertility. They want a little more muscle. They want more facial masculinity and attractiveness. They're more attracted to guys who have a deep voice. And at this point in the talk, my voice always goes down half and they're more attracted to a healthy body scent if they smell t-shirts that have been worn by different guys. And you measure background fitness traits of those guys. Women can detect through scent health, but only when they're fertile. There are also, though, increasing evidence suggests highly fertile women are more attracted to some mental fitness indicators that males have. Dominance and assertiveness, a willingness to diss male rivals, to be decisive. And even a little bit of evidence that women are more attracted to verbal and artistic creativity at peak fertility, and to a good sense of humor. So not just the men's fitness guide, but the kind of James Franco, I can do anything, paint, go to Yale, act, write, direct, whatever. And women are more empowered to poach those good genes from the local alpha males at peak fertility cycle, because women at higher fertility are rated as more attractive by men with regard to many traits, as we now know. Skin condition improves, rated facial attractiveness improves, body shape improves in terms of things like waist-hip ratio. If women wear the t-shirts when they're fertile, those are rated more attractive by men. Women wear more stylish and revealing clothing, as Gad mentioned in the last talk. Their own vocal pitch increases and timbre becomes more attractive and varied. And their verbal creativity increases according to a couple of studies. And I also showed that lap dancers earn higher tips per hour when they're at peak fertility, and it makes tens of thousands of dollars of difference over the long term per year in terms of their earnings. If you're a lap dancer, don't take the pill because you'll earn about $15,000 less per year. Okay. Gad mentioned that most people think biological evolution stopped at the genitals. In fact, most people think it stopped even before the genitals. And it's really taken a surprisingly long time for people to apply sexual selection theory to the primary sexual traits, the genitals. So the last few minutes I want to talk just briefly about a particularly sexy sexual form of sexual fitness. And if there are any kids in the room, they should probably leave now because this will be X-rated. There's a concept called cryptic female choice developed by William Everhart in biology, which is that female genitals and female nervous systems actually continue to assess male fitness during copulation and even after. And whenever females can mate with multiple males over the course of the breeding season, they have the scope for selecting male genitals and copulatory behavior that's more pleasing to them or that's more indicative of male health and fitness. And so females evolved to favor male traits for better copulatory courtship as indicators of good genes and bodily health. And that tends to drive male genitals to be more larger and more complex, copulation to be longer and more vigorous and more aerobically demanding, and even for females to require repeated ejaculations over time before they'll get pregnant. And in insects in particular, you can see females have really been very, very choosy. Insects aren't very bright, but female damselflies have selected the hell out of the penises of the male damselflies. Right? This is a very complex structure, and it's not just about sperm competition, it's about pleasing the female. And indeed, with many different insects, the easiest way to recognize what species is it is just look at the isolated male genitals. Those are the first things to diversify and evolve across species. So cryptic female choice is very powerful. X-rated. So in primates, this also happens. Female primates have exerted selection, and particularly in species that have multi-male, multi-female groups, or where females mate with several different males before they get pregnant, you do get fairly elaborate male genitals. And humans we don't have like really bright coloration like the proboscis monkey, and we don't have their wonderful noses. But you know, we have unusually thick, girthy penises, as illustrated by the famously well-endowed John Hamm. And the female reproductive anatomy is quite well adapted to assess male genitalia and copulatory vigor and endurance. We've known only for about the last 7 years that there's a lot more to the clitoris than meets the eye. The clitoris actually has deep structures, bulbs, and trusses that wrap around the vaginal walls, and complex innervation from the clitoris, the vagina, and the cervix that go to different brain areas during sexual stimulation and activate different feelings. And these deeper structures in the clitoris, along with the vaginal and cervical innervation, seem to be there to assess what's happening in terms of penis girth and length and copulatory vigor. And female orgasm itself has taken a lot of hits by men, mostly male biologists, complaining, it's so irregular, it doesn't happen reliably. What's wrong with women? Why don't they come more? Well, if you change the way you think about it, as I've argued in some recent papers, female orgasm should be discriminating. It should not happen 100% of the time. If it always happened with any male lover, regardless of penis size, copulatory vigor, or mental traits, that would be 100% indiscriminate. What you want for a mate choice, for cryptic female choice, is an orgasm system that is discriminatory, that promotes repeated mating with favored males who have the right traits. And so differential sexual pleasure should predict partner choice. And this should happen even if a woman never even has an orgasm, as long as some males feel better than others, reliably. And even if you're multiply orgasmic, how multiply orgasmic? Is this male lover really fabulous, 12 orgasms? This guy only 3, pick the 12. The base rate doesn't matter. As Nassim said, it's all about the variance. And there's now a lot of evidence that females across many different cultures do prefer somewhat longer than average penis sizes and a reverse to small penises. And we did a paper on this here showing that women who prefer longer penises are more likely to have vaginal orgasms, but not more likely to have clitoral orgasms or masturbatory orgasms. So this is accumulating evidence that sexual selection has even affected the genitals as an indicator of sexual fitness. And this is a particularly cool paper that I love the fact it was published in PNAS, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And it showed that women give about equal importance to penis length and to height, but even more important than either of those is the shoulder to waist ratio. That's a massively important thing that females are attracted to. I don't have time to get into erectile function as a sensitive fitness indicator, but I will just note briefly that if you're a cardiovascular doctor, erectile function is the earliest and most sensitive indicator of systemic cardiovascular fitness and health. If erections aren't working, get follow-up tests because that's not the only thing wrong. Thus, women can use erectile function as a very sensitive indicator of overall male health, particularly cardiovascular health. And to the extent that distance running and persistence hunting and aerobic warfare were important in human evolution, you might expect women to pay attention to male capacities for these. It's hard to assess these directly by observation, but you can get a proxy by making the guy do stuff like that, right? Aerobically prolonged copulation, and humans copulate a lot longer than almost any other primate, certainly more than any other ape. And it might be that the natural selection pressures for aerobic ability favored sexual selection evaluation of those abilities. I don't have time to talk about how these traits are undervalued in modern societies. You all know about this, but you can ask about it if you want. And I'll stop there, take questions. Thank you. Nothing I said was the slightest bit controversial.
Well, I'll start, because I had a question about one of the slides you showed relatively early on. I can't remember what it was until I need the cue to prompt my memory. And it was about the focus of selection, I believe. To go forward a little bit.
Here?
No.
Your slide.
It was, I think right here. Oh, go back. Yeah, and it had to do with I think it was either here or on the mind, happiness, humor as being sort of ornamental and under sexual selection. And I was wondering if those were actually rather maybe as secondary indicators, just like the erectile dysfunction is a secondary indicator of the health status. Maybe these, rather than being primary targets of sexual selection, are secondary targets that are indicators of other traits that are necessary. Because I remember Mel Connor had an early paper in the 70s about among the coon, the importance of being able to learn about the environment and hypothesize about these tracts related to animals and how rich that was, and that was something different about humans compared to the other great apes.
Yeah, good question. So all of these highly ornamental traits are going to be kind of dependent on, even parasitic on, all sorts of other underlying mental capacities that are important, that are the real goods, right? You actually want your kids not necessarily to inherit great sense of humor, but to inherit what humor requires, right? Intelligence and mental health and openness. But if you get the humor, you get the others for free. So my colleagues in clinical psychology, for example, say a funny thing about mental disorders is that they all disrupt your sense of humor. Right? You get schizophrenia, it makes you less funny. You get autism, it makes you less funny. Depression, less funny. Even mania, kind of weird, but less funny. So humor is a very sensitive indicator of mental health. It's also, we've published a few papers now showing it's a pretty sensitive indicator of general intelligence also. Stand-up comedians are generally pretty high above average in intelligence. So it's not that the humor itself is delivering these amazing benefits in terms of how you'll do as a couple, right? Or as a family, but there's sort of guarantees that say everything's working right in that guy's head or that woman's head in a way that's pretty hard to fake.
So what I'm hearing you say is that women need to stop faking it or we're messing with evolution?
Well, we're all messing with evolution all the time, right? And that's one of the funny things about this whole perspective is that we've been literally shaped by the sexual choices that our ancestors made, for better or worse. And we currently, based on the mate choices that we're making now, get to kind of direct the future evolution of our species. And so the stakes are kind of high in terms of how we do that.
Do women evidence higher rape fantasies or domination fantasies during the ovulation phase or dreams?
That's a really good question. Do women show more rape fantasies or domination fantasies at peak fertility? I know that nobody's looked at that yet. It would be great to look at it. But bear in mind that women's rape fantasies are typically about, it's not, I want to be raped by a low-fitness stranger. That's not that. It's, I want a local high-status alpha who's got great genes and high social status to feel so overwhelmingly attracted to me that he can't control his sexual desire for me, and I don't have the willpower to resist his awesomeness. Right? It's really important that we understand that's what the fantasies are like, and I certainly would expect there to be a cycle shift. So, great question.
Well, thank you, Geoffrey. We are going to have to turn to our last speaker for the morning session. So let's give our